we did have a couple of questions that came in regarding, I guess, certain types of materials. Furniture was one. I guess, Dave, you brought up bricks. Spray foam came up, as well as plastics. I guess I'll direct it towards furniture, and then maybe there are answers for other types of materials that come up as well. But furniture, for example, one of the listeners said that it seems like in 10 years, everything is going to be made of particle board. And how if at all, can the industries be influenced so that they create and design materials that are more reusable?
I can just really quickly just kind of reiterate something that Dave said, where you're designing for reuse, designing for disassembly, and part of that is to use materials that are durable. Steelcase, which is somebody that manufactures office furniture. Now, they aren't really technically reused, but because they make durable materials that can be used for decades and stay in good shape and can be remanufactured. They're designed in a way you can take pieces off and refurbish them. So we really do need more of that, and that's kind of why one of the things Reuse Alliance is advocating for is that design for reuse and making sure things are durable and last and can be reused. So yeah, we kind of have to hit it before it's designed and manufactured, because otherwise that's what happens when you have spray foam in buildings and makes it messy, and the mortar that Dave was talking about.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they also talk about product stewardship of, just if you're going to produce something that you be asked to solve, the problems that it'll cause when it's at the end of its life, not necessarily to pay for those, but to come up with a solution. Like, you're going to create spray foam insulation, you come up with a way to remove spray foam insulation, and so on. And I second the idea of durability in that some of the designing for reuse or designing for disassembly experiments have talked about creating panels that could be detached, like in, common for buildings to be remodeled, which generates a lot of waste. And the idea of room panels where you can take your walls down and reconfigure them without having to take them apart. That's something I think they are trying in Japan, where they plan for a remodel, like a family gets bigger or then eventually gets smaller as the kids move out. That may even be 2 remodels of the same building, but if your walls were detachable where you could adjust them, that's kind of a great way to do it with, to do that remodel without any waste.
Yeah, I know we've seen some great projects like that in Syracuse coming from the university. I won't go into details, but there are some great projects like that. And actually, touching on the universities, we do have a number of people in the audience from academic institutions. I wonder if any of you could offer examples where you've partnered with surplus or reuse operations at academic institutions, and what sort of experience you had with that, or what value it brought to your organization.
I could talk a little bit about that. This is Anne.
Great.
Duke University has it used to be a surplus store, and within the last 3 years, they changed their model to taking all the surplus to a warehouse and then offering it up to nonprofit 501c3s. So now nonprofits are able to go into this warehouse and get desks and bookcases and lights and labware, and they also offer up to 12 computers annually to a nonprofit, and it has really just helped this organization tremendously. While we have been growing, we've needed the support system. So I feel like that is just an amazing kind of best practice and bridge to the local community, because that's something that the university is constantly trying to do as well.
I can add one thing, not about the Reuse Alliance, particularly one of our members, the Minnesota Materials Exchange, and their virtual materials exchange, like Liz was explaining, and they use the iWaste system, and they're working with the University of Minnesota Reuse Program, which is an internal physical space where they have the surplus materials. But after a certain period of time, they're going to be making that stuff available via the online materials exchange to the broader community. So they're going even beyond nonprofits and really getting it out there to the public, and it kind of goes through certain channels to get there. So that's a fantastic idea, that could be continued, and likewise, we're going to be working with the University of Minnesota to do trainings as part of our master user that are really focused on different universities and institutions that want to start their own reuse programs. So, rather than starting from scratch, you can learn best practices from people who are doing it already. Right.
Okay, great. And then I think we have time for one last question, which I'll direct to everybody, and then we'll wrap it up. There are some questions about how the economy affects reuse, and also about how reuse affects the economy. So one question said that there may be a perception that reuse doesn't help the economy because people aren't buying items that are creating jobs. And I think one of the slides that I think it was yours, MaryEllen, mentioned a little bit of something that might help fight that idea. Just that reuse does create a lot of jobs. So that's a tool that could be used. But thinking in sort of a more optimistic note, once the economy does turn around, how do we continue to promote reuse in a good economy?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's kind of two sides to it. So in terms of the current economic climate, you have seen people turning more to their reuse organizations, but you also see less people donating. So there is that kind of, reuse organizations are definitely not anti-consumerism, it's just a different consumerism. It's a greener, more sustainable thing. But if people stopped consuming entirely, there would be no reason for reuse organizations. So, I mean, in that regard, there's probably some that have more of an environmental bend that would prefer that. But no, I always say that it's just a different consumerism or different economy. It's not anti-consumerism or
right.
economy. But and then likewise, in terms of job creation, just if you just think about it, kind of what Dave was saying, if you demolish a whole building, it just needs one guy and a tractor. That's one job. But if you systematically disassemble it, you have 20 people working meaningful work, and they are then taking their money and going into their community and stimulating their economy in different ways by purchasing other things and going out to dinner. So I just completely argue that point. So
yeah, I can. And this is Dave again. We basically today we're investing a lot of money in our landfill. So if you'd like to invest in something good for the economy, you might want to invest in people instead of landfills. And that's the way we look at it. Those 24 people that now have a job, that's one landfill that's hurting for money, but 24 families that have some income. And the jobs that we create almost always are American jobs. And that's a sensitive issue, maybe not with you, but it is for a lot of the people that are out of work that I'm training. So I've kind of taken on the cause of like Rust Belt cities and that, where they really are hurting, and they like the idea that we're doing something that creates a lot of jobs here and is good for the environment here. And hey, the landfills, they'll be okay.
All right. Well, I think that's a great statement on which to close the session today. I want to thank all of our panelists, MaryEllen, Liz, Ann, and Dave, for joining us today. I also want to thank our audience. We had well over 250 people sign up, and then I don't know the numbers, but it's in the high hundreds, probably close to 200 that actually attended today. Which shows that there's a great interest in reuse, and that is certainly heartwarming. The webinar will be available, a recording of the webinar will be available on the EFC website as well as the National Recycling Coalition's website. EFC website is efc.SyracuseCoE.org, and NRC's website is www.nrcrecycles.org. If the presenters are okay with us putting their slides up, those will be available as well. And give us a probably a week or two on that. It does take some time to process this stuff. So again, just thank you to everybody. I hope you take the information you got today and make a commitment to reuse more, or start reusing, or just reuse as much as you can. And thank you, and have an excellent day. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Evan.
Thank you.